All right.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. Very excited to do this with my good friend Howie. So let's just dive right into it.
Yeah.
So, Howie, we're 11 years into the Airtable journey. We start. You get venture funding. You become a venture company. Then you get growth capital. You become a growth company. And then typically you kind of become a public company. But you're not public. You're maybe after VC and growth. So what is Airtable today?
Yeah.
Where are you, and how would you describe where you are on the journey?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, when I first moved out to the Bay Area and got into entrepreneurship, going public was always like the marker of success. People were like, oh, I want to build a company that can go public. And, I think I didn't really think twice about it at the time. In retrospect, it was very odd that people attached so much cachet to what I think is now like a very just mechanical part of the company building journey. And I mean, you can have public companies that are not very great businesses, right? Like, you can have a business that's not very durable, doesn't have great competitive advantages, et cetera. You can also have private companies that are really, really great. Like, we know some of the biggest private companies like, Stripe or SpaceX. And so to me, it's become much more of a mechanical consideration, meaning where I put my time and focus is thinking about the long term of our business. And we'll talk a little bit probably about early days of Airtable, kind of founding vision and kind of early growth strategy, and now kind of how we've matured into being kind of a lot more enterprise focused. We become a platform that gets used by a lot of really large enterprise companies. And I think my focus right now is purely on how do we build the best growth engine for the long term of the business. And the way to do that is how do we deliver the most customer value to, especially now, larger enterprises. So the IPO consideration is more of a tactical question of like, is it the right time? Like, what are the advantages like of being a public company? Obviously, you can raise more money. There's liquidity for early shareholders, employees, investors. We're very well capitalized. We have almost $1 billion on the balance sheet, and we're now cash flow positive. So we don't need the capital, and I think we can make a much more kind of intelligent choice about when and how.
So let's talk about one more dynamic on this, and then we'll get a bit more to Airtable. But one of the things you also get when you are public is you get feedback. And you get punched in the face. You have analysts that come on calls and ask you a lot of questions.
Yeah.
You have people write reports about you. You have a stock price every day that's telling you how you're doing. How do you get then the feedback mechanism if you're a private company? And for a lot of you in the audience, if your board is mostly venture people, their business usually is to do what the founder wants, because I really want founder Howie to say good things about me. But what if I'm actually mad at Howie about something? Or what if I think he's doing something wrong and I want to be able to tell him, but then I also don't want him to then say bad things about me. So it's a tricky dynamic, right? So how do you then make sure that because no one wants average outcomes. You don't want an average outcome. So how do you solicit the feedback if you are private to make sure that people are really telling you what they think and what's going on?
Yeah, well, I've taken a page out of my childhood, which is, borrowing from tiger parenting. You surround yourself with tiger parents who give you the critical feedback in the spirit of making you better, right? We just encountered Kim Scott, who is the creator of the radical candor concept, and I think that so applies here because ultimately I think knowing that the people who you put around you, whether it's your executives, your board members, your investors, your advisors, and just who you spend time with. I mean, I think like it's true that you become a function of the people that you spend the most time with and how you interact with them, right? Like they shape you, and I've been very intentional about finding the people who aren't just saying the nice things. Like we've had like very, very spirited discussions with all of our investors, all of our advisors, Thomas for sure, and really just, kind of asking what are we missing about our own business? Like, help me find my blind spots, because I don't need people, I grew up in an environment where like, tiger parents don't like just focus on like telling you the good things about yourself that you already know, right? And I think ultimately that comes from a place of, real respect and wanting you to do better.
To me, one I've always thought with this panel, like what are people in the audience going to take away from it? And we want to talk about things that are useful to you guys. And to me, most important and number one is surround yourself with people who make you better, who give you real feedback. I'll share an anecdote from my own life where I was in a board meeting a few years ago with a founder, and I brought up in the board meeting whether the founder should be replaced as CEO. And we talked about it in the board meeting, and then actually subsequent to that, we were in a process, and I offered that founder as a reference, and the CEO was thinking about investing with us, called me afterwards and said, "Hey, you should know you got a very good reference from this founder." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because the founder said that you came into a board meeting and suggested that he might want to be replaced." And I was like, "Oh my God, this is terrible." But what the founder shared is he said, the reason is everybody was thinking it. And what's going to happen is the market is going to have an opinion about your company that you're thinking of starting. And it doesn't care whether it's going to be nice to you or not. So you have to find ways to solicit feedback in real time. And what I've tried to do, and I think, Howie, you've done the same, is surround yourselves with people that make you better, that tell you the truth. Learn how, I love what Kim mentioned, learn how to solicit feedback for yourself and for your product. It's really important.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to Airtable.
I want to add one thing to that, which is, sometimes I've been asked, like, what does it take to found a company that gets to the scale of Airtable, right? And we're still, in my opinion, like very, very early still in the broader journey of where we could get to over the next 10, 20 years. And, I think the most important thing as an operator or a founder is to have a growth mindset, because the job of figuring out product market fit at the 0 phase is so different from the job of then figuring out how to like fan the flames that you've initially created, and then taking that little flame and like creating a scalable version of it and growing it. And nobody is born into this world just like a diehard operator. I mean, maybe Frank Slootman, but like for most of us, I think you're not born with any of these skills innately. And I think the only defining characteristics from what I've seen, the best founders who transition into continuing to be great operators, which you don't have to be, and I don't think there's any shame in not being, but the best characteristic of them is they're constantly growing and learning. And so I think the only hard requirement for being a kind of a long-term founder operator is to constantly be open to, in fact, like solicit that growth opportunity.
Okay, so next, I think about putting myself in the shoes of some of the young founders or young company CEOs in this audience, and I think that in the AI and LLM era, you're almost expected, even if you're just one person with an idea, to have been able to code the whole thing yourself, have a functioning demo that used AI, and basically almost have a fully formed product and company in like a day, right? Airtable was built really differently. Many people don't know, but for 3 years, basically Howie and the team kind of went in a underground and built product, almost kind of the opposite of what we kind of see in the world of AI today. So talk a little bit about your journey, and then what would your advice be to some of the founders in the audience about having the conviction to say, no, I'm going to actually take time to build this?
Yeah, and I don't think our approach applies categorically. In fact, I think there's kind of like you can almost create like a 2x2 matrix of like the right execution style for any given type of business. The reason why it worked for us to spend 3 years building this product before officially launching it publicly was, one, I had a very, very strong conviction that there was a big opportunity here. And maybe similar or analogous to like if you want to create a space company, right? You can't just like go and like do a weekend project and show, hey, like I built a bottle rocket, let's go and like go full force on this. You got to actually do like a lot of the first principles work and say, okay, we're going to take a different approach than what's been done before. For us, that was saying, look, we don't just want to be another simple collaboration product. Neither do we want to just go and like be a heads-on feature-by-feature competitor to these big monolithic app platforms or big enterprise solutions. Instead, we want to create a hybrid of the two. And my experience at Salesforce before kind of showed me like there was a real opportunity here. I mean, I was seeing and hearing from customers like this big gap in between the lightweight collaboration stuff and then the heavyweight app platforms or enterprise solutions. And so there was already a sense of like there's a there. There's a big TAM. The payoff is worth the concerted investment. You can also go and like do the Twitter thing, which is like literally build a weekend project that works, and maybe nobody expected it to work, but it does, and then you kind of, fan the flames from there. But for us, we took this very deliberate approach because we had high confidence of the massive TAM that was there, but also an appreciation that no weekend hack project could validate this thesis, right? We could certainly vet it by talking to people who had worked in the space. We talked to, the creator of Lotus 123, the first spreadsheet program, to the people who created like Microsoft Access or created other products in this space, to really learn from them, like what worked with your product and like why did it kind of peter out in the web era. Going and talking to early potential customers, figuring out like what their pain points were with trying to manage certain use cases or or workflows in spreadsheets. So we did a lot of kind of learning and development and kind of validation of the idea, even if we didn't have a launched product. Because in our case, like it wasn't about just putting something out there. It was making sure that the fundamental premise was valid. And so over those 3 years, we actually had many different milestones where we kind of unlocked another level of validation. Like, is there an opportunity here? Yes. Is there, like, can we actually build a product that's intuitive enough to give people relational data, app platform-like capabilities, but with a product experience that feels more like using a spreadsheet or a productivity tool? And we did some front-end work to kind of prove that was true. And then built a lot of the back-end architecture that supported the scalable, real-time collaboration experience that is Airtable.
Yeah. And obviously, the obvious implication of that is what might take you a day to build, your competitor might also be able to build in a day.
Exactly.
Right? So as we think about sustainability and compounding over the long term and creating barriers to entry, obviously all of that time that you spent therefore also led to the moat that you have around your business.
And that was very constant in our minds. It's not like we had a leisurely 3 years of just like working on our own time in a basement, like no worries. Like we felt extreme urgency. We didn't take 3 years because we wanted to, just take our time. We took 3 years because that's actually how long it took to build all the necessary components of Airtable. It's a pretty technically substantial platform in that we architected the first of its kind and still like only real-time relational data engine, right? That powered the kind of collaboration experience in the product. We put a lot of finesse into the product and the UX, and this was a fairly early point for rich single-page app experiences like Figma or Airtable, et cetera. And so we did all of this because in the back of our minds, we always knew, okay, if we work on the right things that are actually creating differentiated customer value, and these things are really hard, every ounce of energy that we put into it is going to create a little bit more of a moat for us. Now, doesn't mean like everything that you do is going to create that moat. Some things you do are complete wastes of time, and we've certainly done our fair share of those. But like that's what we tried to always think about is like, is every ounce of energy that we're putting into this, especially without launching, actually going to benefit us in the long term?
So something else that I want to talk about that I think would be relevant is how to learn to change your mind, right? So I'm sure that there's founders in the audience, they're experimenting with ideas. Maybe they had one premise and now they're really thinking of pursuing something different. There's the old adage of the hardest thing to do is when you're in the Super Bowl is at halftime to change the strategy that got you in the Super Bowl in the first place, right? If you think about Airtable, it has gone through the COVID period, the zero interest rate, cash is free, to then radically different. What's the line between stubbornness, between changing your mind? You did a pretty hard pivot, I would argue. How did that process, and what's your advice on staying true to your principles, but also showing the ability to change your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think of it as, almost kind of like a Bayesian net, right? Like when your priors change, you have to change the outcome. And you don't want to just change your approach for no good reason, right? Like, then you just create a zig and a zag that like never compounds. But when the external factors or even sometimes internal factors have switched on you. So, to Thomas's point, we went from early days, there was a lot of differences in the both macro environment, like, the past 10 years before the recent two were a very low interest environment, like fueled a lot of like growth, but also spend on collaboration software. So in a way, like it was easy to build a bottoms up product and get team level, individual level adoption and start there as a primary growth strategy. And you see companies like Dropbox, Slack, Miro, et cetera, that all benefited from that wave. And so we definitely took part in that. We built a product that had the usability to be able to, kind of tap into that bottoms-up energy. And I think there was also a good timing effect of, the web browser at that time, like 15, had just become powerful enough to really support desktop-grade experiences in the web, right? And so, we built this amazing product, kind of timing was good, like in terms of people just starting to like bring their own apps and services into work, right? If you want to use Airtable, you're going to use Airtable, even if it's at a very, very big company that maybe 10 years prior would not have allowed you to choose your own software. But over the past, I would say 3 years, obviously the environment has changed a lot. And the good news for us is, we have been, kind of looking at or trying to find the invisible asymptote in our business. This is one of the areas where I think having a really good counsel of, radically candid, tiger parent-like, investors and advisors has been really, really helpful. In that we were always told, like, okay, these are good times. You're growing really quickly. Like, we had many years where we were over 100% growth at, tens of millions in revenue scale. That's great. But there is going to be this hidden asymptote in your current growth strategy. And, there's a number of factors that could precipitate it, but you need to be ready for that and ideally anticipate it and like start building the next S-curve into your business ahead of time. And as I really started getting into it, I realized like the best companies in the world, like NVIDIA or Facebook, Meta, actually have had many of these asymptotes in their business, but if they're really good at execution, they just went ahead and planted the next seed, like mobile, for instance, for Facebook, before they really, kind of hit a long plateau in the first one. And so, for us, that transition really was from being a purely bottoms-up PLG, like, you just adopt the product and swipe a credit card to pay for it, to actually thinking about how do we make this into a platform that can be sold into a more senior buyer within the enterprise, because those are the use cases that we're seeing generate the most revenue for us, like the most revenue quality, and also like we can just see how big that market is. Like, every Fortune 500 or even 2,000, in the world could be a multi-deca-million-dollar customer of our platform, given the breadth of different use cases that are all really, really valuable to them, that we're already serving in many of our early customers. So
I'll tell you, having talked to so many founders now, I see that everybody wants the PLG dream. It's like, I don't need salespeople. My product is so good. They're just going to put in a credit card, and it's really interesting. And you try and listen, and you're like, okay, yes, but you will.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of time, and kind of leading kind of founders kind of through that journey. To me, what separates the truly exceptional companies is to realize that actually sales and product are kind of different sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
And the companies that work best are the ones that actually have great relationships between both. They should not be antagonistic or blaming.
Yeah.
They actually should work well together, you know? And that's something that hopefully some of your companies will kind of grow and scale. But when you can get that symbiosis between sales and product, that's when you have something special.
I mean, it turns out this is not a novel concept. We just kind of forgot it in the last 10 years of software, where like, there became this rising belief that product trumps all. But like, you think about a CPG company, like when you buy Tide detergent, on the shelves of a retailer, like, it's really not just about the product. I mean, it's got great surfactants and cleans your ketchup stains really well, but also it's a lot about like, how are we going to sell this and to whom and how do we market it, and like all of that packaging, positioning, pricing, like the go-to-market thinking and the selling. In their case, maybe to the specific stores that are going to carry it, like that becomes an important part of what you build and how you take it to market and whether it's successful or not. And so I think, it's an age-old concept, like to think about go-to-market and product as really intertwined. And I think there was a brief, maybe ZERP-fueled moment where, this industry forgot that, but it's always been important and always will be.
Well, in fact, and I know we have a minute left, so this will be my AI part of the talk, and it'll be 50 seconds, but I had lunch recently with Jensen, the founder of NVIDIA, and I asked him, I said, what do you think is the one thing that founders don't spend enough time thinking about or working on?
Yeah.
And I've found his answer really interesting, and to your point, he said positioning. How are you or your company or your product positioned in the marketplace versus existing solutions, versus alternatives, versus competition, and I thought it was really insightful because you often hear founders tell you about an idea. I want to do X.
Yeah.
And you don't often hear them say, here's why it should be done this way, and here's how it's different than how others are getting done. And it's kind of a subtle point, but another takeaway for all of you is don't dismiss positioning.
100% agreed. Maybe a little bit tongue-in-cheek, until we get to the point where AI is making decisions about what software and what products to buy on behalf of every company, I think humans are ultimately the purchase decision makers, right? For any form of software, Airtable, any of your products, and humans need a clear position in their mind of what do you do? What does NVIDIA's GPUs do that nobody else can do, right? Like, what does Airtable do for me as the CIO of a major company that no other platform can do? So ultimately, it is the most important thing. And like, it's almost like that has to be the starting point from which your product roadmap and your technical capabilities flow, rather than vice versa.
So we're done. Thank you for your time. I hope it was
Thank
useful.
You so much.
I hope you build amazing companies.